Hey guys, it's Lewis from Recycle Bicycle Sales here. In today's video, we're going to talk about 5 checks that you should do on your bicycle before going for a bike ride. So this video is actually aimed at the people that think that they don't know anything about bikes yet because they've just bought their first bike. Hopefully this video will give you a bit of an idea of what you should do before going on a bike ride so you feel nice and safe. It's really important to do a safety check before you go on a ride, partly from the safety aspect, but even partly just from a being comfortable on the bike aspect. If you run your eyes over the bike before you go for a bike ride, it kind of just puts your mind at ease because you know that there's really nothing that can go wrong except an outlier, like maybe a puncture or something like that. So without any further ado, let's jump straight into it. The first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna check out the tires, the back one and the front one. We're gonna do a little squeeze test and just check the overall condition. Let's have a closer look. When we're having a look at our tire here, we're just sort of having a quick visual check over it. We wanna see that there's no big thorn that's sticking out of it, or there's no massive slice in the tire from a piece of glass, or even maybe the bike's been sitting in a warm shed for a while and the sort of rubber, I suppose, has eventually dried and begun to crack. If there's any cracks, that might be a pretty clear indicator that we need new tires. So we're just doing a visual check on both sides, on the top, kind of all around. You could even choose to like run your fingers over it to see if there's any abrasions in there, but this is more just a check more than anything. We can even, while we're here, check out the wear on the tire. On a road bike, the way that we check out the wear is we're looking to see if it's still quite sort of dome shape on the top. Here, I'll show you what I mean. So if I'm looking at a tire from the back side or the front side, when the tire is completely brand new, it's very like dome shaped, kind of like that. As it begins to get a little bit more worn out, it might kind of become a little bit flat on the top before it goes back down. That is what a worn out tire would look like. Another way that you can check, I mean, obviously just with your eyes, but even just if you get your finger or your thumb and rub it across from the side, you just wipe across the top, you'll be able to feel if it still feels quite dome shaped or if it's starting to feel a bit flat on the top. If it's feeling flat on the top, that might be time for a new tire. As you can see with this tire, it's actually still in really good condition. And repeat the same process for the front. While we're on the topic of tires, we're gonna talk about tire pressure. So we're gonna pump up the tube. If we open up the valve on a racing road bike like this with the skinny tires, as a pretty average rule of thumb, you'll usually be somewhere between about 80 and 100 PSI. On this one, I'm sitting at about 40, so I've got to put some more air into it. So when we're fitting the pump to the valve, you'll notice that there's 2 different types of valve. We've got this one here, which is called the Schrader valve. Some people call it the car valve. And then we've got this one here, which is the Presta valve. Some people call it the French valve or high pressure valve or whatever. Most racing road bikes will have this type, and some of the more entry-level bikes might have this car valve. So work out whatever you need. Most pumps work on both. For the car valve, the Schrader valve, it's as simple as putting the pump on, lifting it up, and then pumping away. Pretty straightforward. Whereas when we move across to these high pressure ones, the Presta valve, the French valve, they're a little bit different. There's this little valve at the top that you have to undo first. So you undo it as far as it'll let you go, and then you'll put it into the pump and then pump away. And then when you take it off, it's really important that you close that valve again. That way, no air can fall in and out. In regards to tire pressure, for different bikes, there's different pressures that we might run. If you're using a racing road bike with the skinny tires like this, you're usually probably somewhere between about 80 and 100 PSI. If you're using a mountain bike with the big tires, it might be somewhere between like 25 and 40 PSI, so quite a bit lower, because now we're talking high volume, low pressure. Whereas on these racing bikes, it's high pressure, low volume. And if you're on a hybrid bike, like ride to and from work or to the local coffee shop or that kind of thing, you might be somewhere in the middle, maybe around 60 PSI, give or take. The next thing we're gonna look at is the brake pads. On these rim brake bikes, it's pretty easy to be able to see the wear on a brake pad. We can just simply look at the pads and we can see if they've worn themselves down. Often, well not often, almost always, there will be a indicator line on there, like a wear indicator. As the brake pad gets worn down and becomes thinner, when it gets really close to that line, that's time for new brake pads. So we're gonna have a quick look at the front and a quick look at the back. We're just doing a quick visual check to make sure that the brake pads aren't worn out. Now, while we're still looking at the brakes, let's make sure that they're aligned properly. On these rim brake ones here, when we pull the brake lever, we wanna make sure that the brake pad is on the middle of the braking track. We do not want it touching the tire, and we don't want it touching sort of the rest of the rim here, because that just might scratch and and also it's just not going to perform very well as well. The brake pad might not be very powerful. So make sure it's in the center of the brake track, and we can do that on both sides. If you happen to have your tool on you, now would be a great chance to make sure that they're nice and tight as well. The actual brake pad, which these ones are, and they're nice and central on the brake track as well. So I'm very happy with that. We'll repeat the same process on the back wheel too. Make sure that the brake pads are central on the brake track and nice and tight. Here's also a good opportunity to spin the wheel and pull the brake and make sure that the brake does what it's supposed to do. So the next thing we're going to look at is making sure that the gears will work perfectly. Earlier in this video, I said that this video is aimed at beginners who have just got into cycling. I can make the assumption that if you're a beginner who's just got into cycling, you probably don't have one of these fancy workshop stands. So I'm going to show you how you can do this at home. What I like to do is, with the bike on the floor, I put the back of my neck under the seat here so I can lift it off the floor, and then that way I've got both of my hands free to pedal through with the chain and adjust the gears with one hand. So pretty sort of straightforward. I'm just going to lift it onto the back of my neck, and I'm literally just going to go through all of the gears, click one at a time, make sure it goes through every gear. Whether this is something that you are going to adjust now, which I am, or whether it's maybe something that you want to book it in at the local bike shop, it's just good to know that you can hit every gear. So I'll go all the way up and down the cassette in both the chainring, in both chainrings. If you reckon that the gears are not shifting properly and you want to make a little bit of an adjustment, I won't go into it too in depth in this video because we've done one further back on our YouTube channel about how to adjust the gears on your bicycle. So if you reckon you're ready for that step, you can check that out further back on our channel. The next step is just simply a bolt check. I'm just going to say, grab your set of Allen keys and try and put an Allen key in almost every bolt that you can see. There's a couple that I think are really important, so let's have a look at them first. We'll start with the handlebar. This one is a 4mm and it looks like it has a 5 as well. I'm literally just going to go through each of them and just make sure that they're nice and tight. You don't have to stand on the bolt, you just have to make sure it's nice and sort of tight. And we're going to go through all of them. There'll be some on the front of the stem, there will be some on the side of the stem, and then there's even one on the top of the stem as well. And that'll feel pretty awesome to me. Let's have a look at something else. While we've still got our Allen keys in our hand, we can make sure that the seat clamp is nice and tight because we don't want the seat to be slipping down while we're riding. While we're in this seat area, we can even make sure that the saddle rails are nice and tight as well. Now these ones you can go pretty damn tight. If it's like a little bit loose, the saddle can creak around and make a lot of noise, and it might sound like something's broken on the bike, but it's probably just that the saddle rails aren't tight enough. Now we'll tighten up the skewers as well. Some people call these the axles, I suppose, but on a rim brake bike, I'm going to call it the skewer. We're going to make sure that it's nice and tight. And the reason that I just took the bike out of the work stand to put it on the floor is because I want gravity to help me a little bit with this one. So if the bike's sitting down, it's pushing the wheel up into the dropouts. So I know that it's not going to be going in on an angle like this, it's going in nice and straight. So what I did there is I loosened the lever and I tightened it slightly. We want it to be nice and tight when you lever it across, but just remember, one day you're gonna have to take that wheel off. So if you've stood on it and used a really strong tool to put it on, you might not be able to get it back off. Repeat the same process for the back. And the final check that I like to do before going for a bike ride is a headset check. The headset is talking about the two bearings that we have sitting here that allow the handlebars to spin. Now I put a lot of emphasis on this because I've heard stories of it going wrong and people getting injured while they're riding. So follow this part like the Bible. If we grab the front brake, which for this bike is the right hand, and try and rock the bike back and forth, we want to make sure that there's no movement there. If there's a bit of movement, as in the bike's able to rock back and forth, we need to tighten that. If you reckon that your headset feels like it's a little bit loose, you can check out a video a little bit further back on our YouTube channel where we talk about how to tighten your headset. Again, I put a bit of emphasis on this because I think it is quite important. It's a safety part of the bike. So make sure that the headset is nice and tight. So when we're rocking our bike back and forth, what I recommend is having your finger and putting it half over the part of the frame and half over the headset bearing. So we're just going over the middle of the two, because if there's movement there, that's what we need to tighten. The reason I say that is sometimes when you do this rocking forwards and back test, the brake pads might have a little bit of wiggle in them, so it might feel like it's loose, but it might not actually be the headset. So put your finger half over the frame and half over the headset and try and rock it back and forth of which this one has no play. And now you're ready to go for a bike ride. Make sure you've got your water bottle and maybe your pedals, and otherwise you are literally all ready to go. Your bike is nice and safe. I hope you enjoy the ride, and I hope you enjoy this video. If you reckon there's anything that we missed or something that you like to do before you go for a bike ride, let us know in the comments below. I love learning all these different things. Otherwise, I'm going to say thanks for watching. See you in the next video. See you guys.